Hey VC, this is Harvey of Spin the Black Circle and welcome to Friday Night Vinyl. Something special today. I'm going to do an album shootout involving one of my favourite records of all time, or certainly one of my favourite hard rock albums of the last 30 to 40 years. And as you've seen from the thumbnail, I'm talking about Siamese Dream, the second album by Smashing Pumpkins. And let's start with the music. What an album. Gish, their debut LP, is very good. Amazing snare sound on Gish. Some really promising songwriting. Clearly Billy Corgan as bandleader, guitarist, singer, someone very talented. But Siamese Dream is off the chart. It is another level reached in every aspect, from Billy Corgan's songwriting to the musicianship, to the authority of the LP. It's a landmark indie rock album. I wouldn't call Siamese Dream a grunge LP at all. It might have came out and they've been released in the grunge era, but I didn't see Smashing Pumpkins at all as a grunge band. If you look at Billy Corgan's influences from the Pixies to US indie rock to ELO and Van Halen, it was in that era. But the 4 million selling Siamese Dream might have benefited from the grunge era, but it's not a grunge LP sonically at all. It deserves a good pressing and a good release, this LP, because it's one of those LPs in the studio that was such a perfectionist labour of love. It needs a good pressing. What do I mean by that? If you look at the history of the recording of that LP, co-produced between Butch Vig and Billy Corgan, they spent certainly the last 3 months of recording that LP, working 17-hour days to get everything sonically perfect. There are stories of them spending 2 days solid on a 45-second segment of a song. And you can tell, if you listen to this LP on headphones, whatever the format, you'll pick that up. You'll pick up the wall of sound, yes, of the layered guitars, especially when it's electric guitars, but also the attention to detail in every aspect, from the timing to the intricacies of sounds in your left and right channel. Try this LP, whatever the format, on headphones, and you'll see what I mean. This is a poor parallel, but in the same way that the Def Leppard Hysteria, if you listen to that, nothing like Siamese Dream, but if you listen to that on headphones, you'll pick up why it took 3 years to record, because there's sounds zipping out of every ear, and it's sonically a tapestry. And even though Siamese Dream is nothing like that, it's the same approach to perfectionism and every note and every nuance mattering. So that comes through, and you can tell, and it's a classic album, so it needs a good pressing, deserves a good pressing. So I don't have an original pressing, heard good reports about it, but equally this 2011 repress, double album, mastered by a chap named Stan Getz II. Don't know if he is in any way related to the famous jazz musician, but Stan Getz II on a 200-gram vinyl. This was reissued under the auspices of Billy Corgan, I understand, in 2011. And I thought that was it for Siamese Dream. I thought that's an amazing pressing. It sounds uncompressed, weighty, bass sounds great, highs sound great. So I didn't think I would ever want or need another pressing of Siamese Dream, and it does sound fantastic. The dynamics of this album are such that, a bit like the Pixies, it must have been a mastering engineer's nightmare to cut this, because it goes from 1 minute is sonic heavy wall of sound to, in the next 5 seconds, a slow acoustic strum with a gentle voice over the top, and then back to loud again. So an uncompressed sound, which suits vinyl, is very much what this album needs, and you get that with this 2011 heavy duty reissue It sounds sonically very good and open and dynamic. But then, just in the last couple of weeks, this RSD Essential version came out, and it is my version is the Red Smoke 180-gram version. This is an EU pressing. Can't really decipher who the mastering engineer is on this, either from the Dead Wax or from any of the notes that I've seen on Discogs or anywhere else. So who knows? Some have suggested that it might be the same master. I don't think it is at all, because sonically this is very different from the 2011 pressing. That might be the case for the US pressing, I don't know, but certainly the EU pressing, which is what this is, it's sonically very different to the 2011 foil pressing. So how is it then, and which would I recommend? So this surprising, actually, when I first put it on, played it through twice now and A/B'd it against the foil version. The first thing you notice is that you have to crank the volume up on this, because it's mastered much lower than the foil pressing. So first I thought that's quite disappointing, but anyway, because obviously if you crank the volume, then the noise floor is going to go up. And also I noticed, even after cleaning it on my Project VCS, there was still quite a few pops and cracks, even in the quiet passages. But I ran it through my VCS a second time, and in the second time through it's much better. And on that second time through, I began to notice something, and that's that this actually sounds way more balanced and just right than this foil cover pressing is. And what do I mean by that? So if I start with Cherub Rock, for example, the guitars on the foil pressing, they just sound really toppy and extreme, to the extent that the kind of wall of sound that stop the bass low end coming through, and also affect the mids. So you've got these like really like razor across the ears highs with the guitars, which you could say, well, actually that's great, because that's what it sounded like in the studio. But so I thought maybe it's meant to sound like that. That's what the sound that Billy Corgan was going for. But then hearing this, which is a really much more balanced sound between bass, highs and mids, this just sounds right. And Cherub Rock is a great example of that, because the bass and the drums are the kick drum and the snare drum, and the bass in particular, are punching on this through, because they're not behind the wall of really high end guitars that are masking the bass on this version. And then that kind of flows through the album, especially in the bass, to a much more balanced, certainly a more balanced sound on this reissue. Surprisingly, given what I've read online on Steve Hoffman forum and other places. Listen, this is all system dependent. Maybe this pressing just suits my system better, but headphones are good for these sorts of A/B shootouts, and I think this is it's an easier listen, I think, than the foil pressing, because the guitars are so oppressive, especially on loud passages on this. On quieter passages, I'd say they're a bit more even. When you've got those quieter songs like Mayonnaise or Disarm or Luna, there's possibly not much to choose from there. Quite balanced. The bass maybe still a bit more punchy on this for some reason, and actually the noise floor being worse on this, now that I've cleaned this a second time on my VCS. This is pressed at Jay-Z, I think, which has got kind of a patchy reputation for pressings. But yeah, I mean, if you listen to Summer on this, for example, wow, on this RSD pressing, and yeah, throughout the dynamics and how it sounds, it just sounds more balanced, easier on the ears. This uncompressed. Yes, it sounds dynamic, but as my analogy earlier, it's a bit like having a razor across your ears on my system, which is quite revealing on the Planar 6. And then this just sounds like, you know, a balanced band in the studio, and it still has full attack. It doesn't mean that it's subdued on those guitars. It just sounds more like a band playing. So that's my two penneth on my system. Surprisingly, given what I've read online and given the notoriety of the foil 2011 master, I prefer this this RSD Essential Siamese stream, and it's good to see the original cover reinstated. This, I'm not a massive fan of that cover art. This foil thing worked when it came to Gish. It looks good on a door. Other two albums that were in this reissue campaign, but I think this LP looks better in its original artwork, and also they've replicated the labels, I think, of the original vinyl pressing. So there you go. There must be some Smashing Pumpkin fans in the VC other than me. I'd love to hear what you think. I would love to hear also if you've got an original pressing and can shoot out between all three and tell us which is the best on your system. But I'll try and do a few more of these shootout videos, as my collection tends to be heading towards, not deliberately, but seems to be heading towards multiple pressings, which happens to many of us, of the same LPs, the LPs that we love. Then I'm sure there's much more I can do if there is interest. So that is it from me for Friday Night Vinyl, and I hope everyone has a good rest of weekend. Peace. Keep on spinning. Bye.